We are about to enter the vortex of Tolkien clickbait, and we're going to be criticizing Gary over at Nerdrotic. And again, I'm not actually somebody who has most. I'm not someone who has a lot of problems with what Gary does. I actually agree with him on a lot of topics. Like the obvious topic would be Game of Thrones. We actually converge on many issues because he was a very strong critic of D&D and far ahead of the curve in terms of YouTube, in terms of online people. He was very ahead of the curve. I'm never going to take that away from him. He gave a lot of warning signals, and he was attacked, again, I think often ignorantly by people who were defending the show for no good reason. In terms of GOT, he's pretty rock solid, but as they say, just because you're very strong in one field will not necessarily mean that in the other field you're going to be very good. We're going to listen to Gary as he goes back and forth on Tolkien and allegedly how Amazon is going to destroy his vision, allegedly, in their upcoming prequel series. We're going to note some problems, but also some virtues in how he's presenting the information.
Rings has been such a niche success, selling 150 million copies worldwide, being translated into 57 languages, 2 film trilogies that have made well over $6 billion combined. And I'm sure there's room to grow with that. I'm just not sure you're capable of doing it, Amazon, considering all of those previously mentioned in my past videos red flags, including Opie and Opie, the 2 inexperienced showrunners with bad reboot connections who have only written a bad Star Trek movie. There was John Howe, who was the conceptual designer on Lord of the Rings, being brought in to essentially just draw a map and show up on their trailer, and he was never called back, as well as Tom Shippey, the Tolkien scholar, either being shown the door or walking through it on his own. Then, of course, there's Bad Reboot itself, which only last summer made statements like, no more white comfort. Then, of course, there's all the actors who have come and gone, and the rumors of nudity with the hiring of an intimacy coordinator on top of Jeff Bezos saying he wanted a Game of Thrones. It seems Amazon is insistent on repeating the same mistakes of their fellow repurposers. Why? Well, let's start with Lord of the Rings is pretty much everything Hollywood hates right now.
He was a very deep, profound Catholic, Roman Catholic, and this comes out in his books. Now, The Lord of the Rings is not a religious book in that it's not about God and the angels and so on, but in fact it's a very religious book in tone, and he knew this while writing it. It's really, it's a book which tries to convey the feeling of religion to a world which is not actually a believing world, or a non-religious world. This, I think, is largely why it's been so popular in America, in what is on the whole a kind of godless modern world. It particularly appeals because it's bringing religion back into fiction.
Now, I'm not a religious person, and I didn't get all of that out of The Hobbit or The Lord of the Rings. To me, it was just a good story, but it's most certainly in the Silmarillion, and you have to wonder how Amazon is going to work that out in an era of critical race theory. We saw Disney just got...
On this early salvo, to be the nicest and fairest, I could only detect really one solid piece of information, which is the Shippey thing. I think that is very rock solid that Shippey has left the project. He is a Tolkien expert, though I don't know his work in particular, but I have no reason to dispute that he knows his stuff, and he's no longer with the project, which is definitely a red flag. So I think with that part, Gary is pretty good. As for this rest of the stuff, and I get it, he doesn't like J.J. Abrams. Now, just to give my own thing, I do like The Force Awakens. I don't like Rise of Skywalker very much. I probably hate it even more than Gary does. In terms of Star Trek, I think it's very hit or miss. If we have to get into it, I'd probably be more critical than supportive, but I don't think that they're the worst things in the world. But as far as other Star Trek related stuff, it's a little bit all over the place, and I'll do more detailed analyses of that. So I'm not defending JJ necessarily. I, think he does some good stuff, he does some bad stuff. But in terms of what he's bringing out, technically this is totally irrelevant. If JJ is for whatever, Black Lives Matter, more power to him, or you don't like his stuff, fine. That's fine. That's a political stance. It doesn't have anything to do with this thing. And it doesn't really have anything to do with this thing because his own narration, his own editing shows that most of the people in charge here are white. So take it for what you will. JJ being against white supremacy is kind of like, okay, whatever. I don't think he really is. I think it's just a cause celeb he's signing on to. Maybe he's serious about it, but I have my doubts. In terms of what he's saying about the books, yes, they are very religious, but that only begs the question as to what kind of Catholic Tolkien is, or even whether Hollywood is technically irreligious or satanic or atheist. You gotta give us more information, and I can just say, as a religious expert, saying that the modern world is without belief, and he doesn't tell us where the clip is from, but even in the 1960s and 70s, it's a very ignorant. It's not saying very much. It's just a lot of innuendo. So hopefully, we're going to get a little stronger indictment as we go ahead.
Dialogue. This is the Silmarillion, and they want to make 5 seasons out of this with 8 to 10 episodes each. We all saw what happened with The Hobbit, and it didn't turn out that well, and that was with Tom Shippey.
The party. Slut. What is going on here?
The Lord of the Rings, which is the greatest trilogy of all time, is that because a bunch of crazy guys and gals with a lot of money and a lot of creativity set out to make something they love by honoring the original creator's work.
Well, we didn't want to put any of our own, certainly in terms of the thematic material, we didn't want to put any of our own baggage. I mean, we had no interest in putting our messages into this movie, but we thought that we should honor Tolkien by putting his messages into it. And we thought he cared about things. The countryside and the rise of evil, and he cared passionately about certain issues. And we thought what we should do to honor him is to make sure that what he cared about ends up in the movie.
Okay, so now he's shifting it to, let's not talk about Amazon as much as let's talk about Peter Jackson and how much we can trust Peter Jackson. Now, obviously, I have to do a lot of work to show that Peter Jackson really didn't adapt the books. But in terms of the long, short version of it, Christopher Tolkien himself, Tolkien's own son, said he didn't think the movies really do reflect the books. He often does use a quotation from Tolkien about allegory, but he doesn't include other quotations where he refines his position or even takes a lot of it back, where people think he's always against allegory. It seems he's against simple-minded allegory, or allegories that reduce his work to just a very kind of puppet theory about how he's just doing stuff on the nuclear war or the Cold War or World War II or World War I. He hated those readings, but he did not mind more sophisticated readings that did see the allegory that clearly is in Lord of the Rings. But notice, too, he's kind of contradicting himself because he's sort of saying, well, The Hobbit didn't turn out too well. But earlier in the video, he was invoking The Hobbit and its popularity. Again, the film, not the book. Yeah, he's not maintaining complete consistency even within his own argument, but there you go. Now, in terms of the broader topic, do I trust Amazon? I think there are legitimate reasons to be very, very worried. But does it meet his kind of devil image that they're out there to destroy Tolkien or everything he stands for? I think, frankly, they just don't care. They're just going to look to do, as he says, a kind of Game of Thrones spectacle show. Whether that is closer to Tolkien's vision or against it, I'm not so sure. That's going to require some more work and investigation. I will say, though, I don't buy this whole Peter Jackson is our Jesus Christ Savior. I just don't understand where he's getting this from. Because he said in interviews over and over again, very repeatedly, New Line did The Hobbit as well as Lord of the Rings for money. The reason New Line did any of these projects was for money. They didn't care about Tolkien. They didn't care about his vision. He just persuaded them that you're going to make a lot of money if you bankroll me. That's it. So I'm not clear where Gary is coming from. And this is not an interpretation. He's said this over and over again. He's made it quite clear. The main thing driving the whole project was money. Now, Peter Jackson, may have liked the books, and maybe he was sincerely trying to adapt them. That is not why the books were made, and that's not what happened in terms of the creative process. It was a financial thing for the most part. So I have no idea what Gary's talking about. He's just selling a mythological history. But he's got a lot more to say here, and obviously these positions are very tough because the books are big. They're very big, and the movies are very big and very beloved. So we're going to have to go carefully going through all these positions and figuring out what is true and what is false. But this has to start somewhere, so we're beginning here. So start of working through the controversies on Tolkien